Our series on tough questions and God's answers. Today I'm going to be talking about, is Jesus really God? Now, probably almost everyone here don't question that. And you're probably thinking, well, Russ, why are you even preaching this? I have no doubt that Jesus is God himself. Well, the reason is this. Not only am I hoping that some of you that may have doubts and struggles come to the truth, but I'm trying to equip all of you as you talk to your friends, families, neighbors, and co-workers, and they have these questions. I know in my life, as I've gone out and shared Jesus with people, almost all these questions have come up. Sometimes they do it just to shut you down, but more often they're really curious. They're struggling with the truth. And we need to have the answer to their questions. Paul tells us to be ready to give an answer to what people ask us. And so even if you don't question these things yourself, I hope I can equip you to be able to respond to those who do. Now, this one often comes up. Was Jesus really the Son of God? Was he really God? I believe he was a good man and a good teacher, but I really can't believe he was God himself. Was he really any different than Buddha or Muhammad? Weren't they all about the same? These are the tough questions people are asking. And one of the reasons why it happens is because since we believe in freedom of religion, and I do, people have turned that into equating all religions as being the same. But Christianity teaches different. As we think about, was Jesus really God, I want to first talk about what Jesus claimed about himself. It tells us in Matthew chapter 26, verses 63 through 64, and this is when he was on trial, right before he was crucified. And he's before Caiaphas, the high priest. It says, the high priest Caiaphas said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. At this point, Jesus could have saved his life by saying, no, I'm just a good rabbi. I'm just a good man trying to lead people in the right direction. But note how he responds. He says, yes, it is as you say. Jesus replied, but I say to you all, in the future, you will see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of the Mighty One coming on the clouds of the heavens. He announced not only he was the Son of God, he announced he would come back as God himself to judge those and reign with God in heaven. Now, one thing I've heard people say is, the Bible never does say that Jesus claimed to be God. Well, and there's a little bit of truth in that. And here's the reason. Jesus did not declare himself to be God. Why was he so mysterious? Think about this. If he declared at the beginning of his ministry, hi folks, I'm God, what would have happened? Well, they'd have laughed at him. And if he said, no, really, seriously folks, I am God. Want to shake my hand? What would have happened was he would have been stoned to death. He'd have had a ministry of about 10 minutes flat. It had been over. The reason is this. The Jews had no concept of the Trinity. It was being developed in their mind. So by Jesus claiming to be God, he was saying, I am the flesh and God, and only the Heavenly Father who is Spirit could be God. And they would have said, he is blaspheming. He is speaking blasphemy. He was basically saying, I am Yahweh, Jehovah, which is what he's called in the Old Testament. What he did instead was this. He gradually revealed himself to the people. First the disciples, then the larger people. And he taught. He did miracles. He loved people. He ministered to them. He allowed them to come to the right conclusions over time that they could accept Jesus truly as God himself. When the people concluded that he was truly God, they owned it. They weren't being told that they had come to that realization themselves. When Jesus spoke about himself, he did call himself the Son of Man and the Son of God. Now, you may think, well, the Son of Man doesn't sound like he's claiming to be God, but the Son of Man was used in Ezekiel talking about someone coming from heaven that can relate to mankind. And that's why he called himself the Son of Man. He was saying basically, I am being able to relate to you because I have come in a human body. I understand what you are experiencing in life. But he also called himself the Son of God, and that was only done in the Old Testament, talking about those that came from heaven like angels. So when he called himself the Son of God, he was claiming he was from heaven. He wasn't an earthly person. He was from heaven itself. Additionally, he called himself and allowed others to call himself the Christ and the Messiah, which is the Aramaic and Hebrew word for the Christ. That's used to say that someone has been specially sent by God on a vital mission of redemption, salvation, and rescue. The people believed that God would eventually send a Messiah to rescue the Jewish people from those who were oppressing them. And Jesus was the one that claimed that he was the Messiah. When I was in New York City, I was 7 years old, and our parents took us on vacation. And we were in Times Square. And we were walking around, and some man that was half crazy came up to us and said, "Hi, I'm God! I'm the God himself!" Now, you think my dad got down and went, "Oh, I worship you"? No. He quickly got us moving away from him. Why? Because anyone who claimed to be God was a crazy man. Well, Jesus himself understood that. And thus he did not claim himself directly to be God until toward the end he became more open to about it, knowing that if he did it too soon, he would be rejected and be stoned to death, rather than dying on the cross as was planned by the Heavenly Father. And as evidence in his life that he was God himself, we had him do many miracles. Now, miracles happened in the Old Testament, but they were few and far between. At best, a prophet like Elijah might do just 2 or 3 miracles in his whole life. But Jesus was doing dozens of miracles a day. Only someone that was divine could do that. But also, Jesus claimed to forgive sin. In Matthew chapter 9, verses 1 through 8, we have these words, which states that a paralytic came down, and friends had brought him to the house Jesus was teaching in, and Jesus said, "I forgive your sins." Well, only God can forgive sins. And then Jesus healed him as evidence he had the power to forgive sins, is what it tells us. Jesus claimed to forgive sins. Only God can forgive sins. But also it tells us that Jesus taught with divine authority. It tells us that Jesus taught not like human teachers, but as someone with special authority. His teachings carried a profound wisdom, truth, and spiritual authority that had never been heard before. It transcended what anyone had ever taught, including the great prophets of the Old Testament. Again, this was proof of his divinity. But lastly, and most importantly, Jesus did declare himself to be God cryptically. There was a series of sayings in the book of John called the I Am sayings. Now, understand something. Jews never used the term I am if they could avoid it. You know why? Because when you said I am, you were using the same term that God used for himself when he called himself Yahweh or Jehovah. Same name, different ways of saying it. When God said, "I am Yahweh, I am Jehovah," he was saying, "I am that I am." And the Jews were so concerned about the reference of the name of God in the Old Testament, they would never say, "I am," ever. We use it all the time. They never would. But yet Jesus 8 separate times used the term I am. And every time he did, he got people's attention. Because no one ever did that. Could he be claiming to be God himself? The most important I am saying was found in John chapter 8, verse 58, where he says, "Before Abraham was, I am." Let me repeat that. Before Abraham was, before he was ever born, I am. It was so powerful. It was so controversial that tells us later on that they tried to stone him to death that very moment because he was saying blasphemy. Yes, folks, Jesus did claim to be God. He did it through his teachings, his miracles, His ministry, he did it cryptically through his I am sayings. He called himself the Son of Man and the Son of God. Jesus did claim to be God himself. But what did others say about Jesus? Well, Matthew 16:16, we have Peter responding to Jesus when he said, "Who do you say I am?" He said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." None of the disciples never said that before. That was a breakthrough moment where they realized who he really was. Not just a good man or a popular rabbi or a prophet. He was the Son of God, the Messiah, the Christ. Thomas later on said, when Jesus was resurrected from the grave and he finally got to see Jesus, and Jesus said, "If you want to touch where they put the nails in my hands, you can." And Thomas said, "My Lord and my God." There was never a question at the end who Jesus was in the eyes of the disciples. They struggled with it for 3 years, but after the crucifixion and resurrection, they knew. Now understand, if Thomas would have been wrong and said, "My Lord and my God," Jesus should have shushed him for saying something so sacrilegious by calling himself God, but Jesus didn't. John himself, the apostle, the disciple, said in John 1 verses 1 through 18, he talks about who the Word was. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And the Word was" who?
God.
That's right. And the Word was who?
God.
There we go. So we have Peter, we have Thomas, and we have John saying very clearly that they believed he was God. Now think about this. All the disciples, except for John, died an execution death because of their preaching about Jesus Christ being the Son of God. And John died in prison on the island of Patmos. If they had any doubts of who he was, you think they would have been willing to die for him? They were convinced. They had no doubts, to the point that they were willing to go to the edges of the world to preach the truth of the gospel and die when necessary, boldly standing up for what they believed to be the truth. If Jesus wasn't God in the eyes of the disciples, they died for nothing. They died for a fraud. Would you die for a fraud that you knew the back of your mind wasn't true? Would you die for something that you weren't sure about? That you weren't sure? Yeah, I kind of believe it, but I'm not so sure. They all died, every single one, standing up, preaching the truth about Jesus Christ. They had no doubt. They were there. They saw it. But if you're saying, well, okay, the disciples, they were fooled. Jesus, he claimed it, but it wasn't really true. How about this source? There was a historian by the name of Flavius Josephus. Josephus was a Jew who had grown up as a priest. And then he jumped ship and became a Roman citizen. And he lived in Rome itself and was a close friend of the Emperor Flavius. And later on in life, he decided to write an authoritative history of the Jews. He was never, ever a Christian. He died a Roman and probably someone who was an agnostic. But in the Antiquities of the Jews, the second book he wrote, in book 18 of that, chapter 3, section 3, Josephus said this. He said, "Now, there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it ever be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as to receive the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many Jews and many Gentiles." Now note what he says next. Here's a man who doesn't believe as a Christian. He says, "He was the Christ." The authoritative historian working for the Romans, writing about the Jews. "And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men amongst us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him. For he appeared to them alive again the third day." An historian writing 70 years later that didn't even believe as a Christian was writing these words, folks. "As the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him, and the tribe of Christians, so named for him, are not extinct at this day." He wrote that in 73 AD. Josephus also in his works referenced John the Baptist and James, the brother of Jesus. So here we have a Roman historian writing the authoritative history of the Jews, a non-believer himself writing from Rome about the exact existence and who Jesus was in the eyes of many people. Now I got to ask you a question. What do you believe about Jesus? In Matthew 16:15, he asked his disciples, what about all of you? Who do you say I am? Now Peter responded with, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. What do all of you believe? You got three choices. And only three choices. That's it. Okay? Many believe him to be a great man and teacher, but not God. Many believe that he was a great example to follow, a great moral teacher, but merely a man. But this belief is not defensible, folks. It doesn't hold up to logic. There are only three choices that you can choose about Jesus. And here they are. You ready? He was either a liar, or he was a lunatic, or he truly was the Lord. Those are your three choices. He can't be just a good man or a good teacher. You see, some of you may say he was a liar. Why? Because his claims about himself are false. And folks, no matter how good he taught, if he told lies about himself, saying he was the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, the Son of Man, God himself, if he said any of those things, that erased all the other good things he said. He was a liar, wasn't he? He was a liar if he said those things and it wasn't true. But the other choice is he was a lunatic. If Jesus claimed that he was the Son of God, the Son of Man, the Christ, the Messiah, God himself, if he claimed those things and they weren't true, but he believed they were true, what does that make him? Crazy. A lunatic. Like that man that I saw in 1964 in New York City, claimed to be God. Did we take him seriously? Did we ask him to autograph our Bible? No. We immediately assumed he was crazy, and my dad wanted to get us away from him as quick as possible. He didn't know what he might do next. If an ordinary person believes himself to be God in the flesh, incarnate, then that person is simply, quite simply, insane if it's not true. Would you agree? So he's either a liar or he is a lunatic. And that's what your friends have to realize. Or there's one other choice, the one I pick. He is the Lord. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He is the Son of God. He is God himself. He is not a liar. He is not a lunatic. He is the Lord God. If Jesus' claims about himself are true, and I believe they are, that means he is divine. He is the Lord. Here are the three choices. I'd like to think almost all of you believe that he is the Lord. But today, let me ask some of you that may not be so sure. What do you believe about Jesus? Whom do you say he is? Which choice do you believe? Let's stand as we have a time of response.